Well, good morning, and let me add to the happy Father's Day greetings that's already been expressed so far this morning. On Father's Day, I like to think back to different stories and occasions with my dad, the funny things and the meaningful things. And on a hot summer day like the one we're going to have today, I go back, when I was like 15 or 16 years old. My dad was taking my younger brother Steve and I to a hockey tournament game, and we were running late. And so Dad was being liberal with the speed limit and the stop signs because we were trying to get there on time so that we could join our team for the first face-off. And while we were there, we were careening through the highway system of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we saw a few cars that were stranded on the side of the road because that tends to happen on a hot day like this one. And as we got closer and closer to one of them, we realized that a mom and her 3 little kids' car had stalled. And so as we got closer and closer, my dad's hands began to fidget on the steering wheel. And you could tell that something was happening inside of him. Because on the one hand, he knew that we were running late, and we have a saying in the Skillen household: early is on time and on time is late. Anybody else have a household like that? Okay, and that's what I'm passing on as a gift to my children. And so Dad was just wrestling inside. And so at the very last moment, Dad, like stunt driver level swerved over to the shoulder just in time to us, like they're like walking distance from us, and this family piled into our already crowded car with hockey sticks, stinky hockey equipment, and I think I'm holding one of the kids on my lap as we try to get to the nearest fueling station. And so we let them off and we continued on our way to the rink. And as we were getting closer and closer, I was a little frustrated with Dad. I'm like, we're going to be late because of this little thing, this little detour that you just decided to do. So I asked him, Dad, why did you help these people? I mean, we're not car mechanics. We are running late. Why did you do this? He goes, those kids didn't have any shoes on. They're walking on this hot asphalt. He's like, I don't care how late we're going to be. You don't leave people stranded in that type of situation. You know, this push and pull inside my dad, and when we have similar moments like that, is a delicate interplay between our thoughts and our desires. This is something that we sense time and time again. When we want to make a decision, we have our thoughts. We have the thing that we want to do. We have our task list. We have our idea of how things should go. But then right alongside of them at times, we get these rogue emotions, these rogue desires to break rank from all the plan and to take these subtle swerves and detours towards something else. So I want to start off by saying this morning. It's something that psychologists and philosophers have concluded, and it's something that we might struggle with on the initial consideration of it, but just give me a moment to try to explain. It's this: we'd love to believe that we are governed by our thoughts, but we actually might be governed by our desires more than our thoughts. So in order to try to prove this, let me share the curious case of Wilt Chamberlain and his free throw process. This is Wilt Chamberlain. For those who are KU Jayhawk fans in the room, he's a beloved. He's like on the Mount Rushmore of basketball players. Wilt Chamberlain changed the game. He was a menace in the paint. He rebounded every shot. He dunked the basketball. He was hard to stop, and so teams tried to find a strategy to stop him, and they realized the best way to try to stop him was to foul him in the act of shooting because he was terrible at free throws. I mean, it was miserable. So there's a chance that if he was by the bucket and you fouled him and he had 2 foul shots, he would miss one or both of his free throws. You can get the defensive rebound and make your way on your own possession. So he had a problem in his game and he needed to fix it. So one of his teammates, Rick Barry, decided to try to help him out, and he was the appropriate guy to do so. Rick Barry's career free throw percentage was over 90%. That's the guy that you inbound the ball to when you know the other team is going to foul at the end of the game. Rick Barry, though, had a unique free throw procedure. He would shoot underhand, or what we call granny style. You know what I'm talking about? If you're playing a game of horse in the driveway, you want to try to stump your opponent, try the granny shot. They will miss it every single time. And so he taught Wilt Chamberlain the underhand free throw, and it worked. In fact, in his best year of shooting free throws, he shot them underhand, and he was at 61%, which is terrible, but it was still way better than where he was beforehand, right? In fact, his career best game was 100 points in one game. 28 of those points were from free throws that he was able to shoot and make. So it was rather curious that after discovering how to improve his game by making more free throws, Chamberlain decided to break rank from this new form of free throw shooting and go back to traditional free throw shooting and have his percentage go all the way back down to the bottom. So people started asking, why'd you do this? And this was his answer. I didn't want to look like a sissy when I was shooting free throws. So here's a collision of thoughts and desires. Chamberlain knew the thought, if I want to shoot better free throws, I shoot them underhand. But his desire was stronger than his thoughts. He didn't want to look foolish in his mind when he was shooting his free throws. So there was a collision between what he knew and what he desired to look like or he desired to do. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, that's Wilt Chamberlain. I have a stronger moral fortitude. I am governed by my thoughts and not my desires. But is that really the case? Imagine the thing that's the most challenging to you and to me, the thing that owns us in life. Maybe it's we have a short temper, and we know better. We know that we don't look very attractive, that it is not the best thing for our family in a crowded restaurant if we lose our mind to this poor waitress who upcharges 25 cents for a container of ranch. We know that we should just let it go, that life is too short. But in the middle of our tirade, it dawns upon us, even though I know that this is not right, I have a desire to give this person a piece of my mind. Or taking the area of generosity, Jesus tells us it's better to give than it is to receive. And so Christians, we should excel in the grace of generosity. And so we know that we should set aside a portion of our money. We should give it to the church. We should give it to charitable organizations. We should meet the needs of those around us. But if we don't actually follow through with giving and generosity, it's not because we don't know better. We just simply don't have the desire to be generous. Some would say, perhaps, I want to get my life back. I feel like I've let myself go in a few areas of my life, and so I want to start some new habits and put some new discipline in my life so that I can get my life back in the ways that I've let it go recently. And so we map out a plan, right? And we make appointments, and we set up alarms, and we have like even the rubber band on like the wrist and snap ourselves to try to break some bad habits. And so we try to employ them, but we don't follow through with them. It's not that we don't know what we need to do. Is that we don't have the desire to do so. This idea of being governed by our desires, another name for it is allegiance. We all have allegiances. This is something that we do. We make an allegiance to a sports team. We make an allegiance to a brand of clothing. We make an allegiance to all these things. And no matter what our thoughts are, we will fall in line to the things that we have an allegiance to. And it's simply because that our souls are made to make things big. The Bible tells us to magnify the Lord. Is this a natural function of the human being is to make something bigger than what it is? Here's a few examples. The guy on the top left has got this Beanie Baby collection, and that's his thing. He's known as Todd the Beanie Baby guy, I guess. But it didn't start out that way. Maybe he just got one in a Happy Meal from McDonald's during that one time when they were all popular. And then he started collecting a few more. And then he started scrolling eBay. He started going to estate sales at the chance that maybe there are some Beanie Babies just lying around. And then probably at some point his parents tried to have an intervention with him and said, Todd, we love you, but man, this is kind of getting out of hand. And he's like, you haven't seen all the stash that I have downstairs that I've been hiding from you, right? Like he is the Beanie Baby guy. If Todd's not around and somebody says, hey, where's Todd? They say, who's Todd? Oh, the Beanie Baby guy, that's him. It started off something maybe kind of innocent, but it becomes a thing that he magnifies. How about the guy on the top right? That's a Buffalo Bills fan on a very cold day, according to his surroundings. But this guy's got his shirt off and he's having a good time. He wants to expose his Buffalo Bills tattoo that he has on his chest. I think looking back, he should have put it on a different body part so that he could do this, and on any occasion and not be so cold. But here he is. He has to show his allegiance. He has to magnify the Buffalo Bills and his love of them, rain or shine or snow or very cold. Remember, he's in Buffalo, New York. It's cold all the time there. And so here he is magnifying his allegiance. And then on the bottom middle, that's Pastor Brent's car. He may have announced the past couple of weeks that people have been putting Ridgepoint stickers on the back of his car that we have available at the Connect table. And, we haven't caught the person who's done this. So I have a theory. Maybe it's really Pastor Brent, after all, doing this to his own car because of his love and his allegiance for his church, he's just kind of embarrassed to admit that he would do this to his own car, right? But we magnify, we make things big. This is something that we can't stop doing. This is something who we are. So the discipleship question is, are the things that I am magnifying, are they worthy of being magnified or not? So throughout church history, this has been a topic of discussion, and this is what St. Augustine, who's one of our church fathers, says. He says, but living a just and holy life requires one to be capable of an objective and impartial evaluation of things. To love things, he says, in the right order. So Christianity is not so simple. It's not just get rid of everything and renounce everything. It's also a reclaiming of things and a reordering of things. It's to put things in their proper order according to what is going to allow the magnification of the greatest love for our God. So we're going to talk about allegiances over the next few weeks, and today we're going to talk about allegiance to relationships. Next week we're going to talk about what is the Christian's connection and allegiance to the nation where they live. And on July the 4th, we're going to talk about what it means to have an allegiance to Jesus. But we're going to talk about relationships today, and it brings me back to my dad and how he made that little detour on that hot summer's day. Why did my dad do that? I mean, none of us were mechanics. There's a good chance that somebody would come in after us that would have a better handle on the situation, who wouldn't be running late to a hockey tournament game. Why did my dad decide to swerve? Why did he have the capacity to do so? I would love to hope that the reason that my dad did so is because of my dad's orientation towards Christianity and being a follower of Jesus. Because we see in a place like Matthew chapter 9 where Jesus is encountering a crowd of people. This is a summary statement. So he's been dealing with lives. There's all these stories leading up to this point of Jesus dealing with different lives in the area of Galilee. And so Matthew pushes back and he wants to zoom out, more of a summary statement of who Jesus was, what he normally did. And this is what he says in Matthew chapter 9, verses 36 and following. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So when Jesus saw people, if they were familiar or a stranger, Jesus was drawn towards them instead of away from them. And he was drawn towards them not to use them for his own benefit, but to help them. Now, there's a key word in this passage that's important for us to know and remember. It's the word compassion. And if you're a serious Bible reader, you need to know the original meaning of this word. This is in the original Greek language, which the New Testament was written in. The word is splanchnizomai. It's one of the best words, hardest words to say in the Greek language. So naturally, I want you to say it along with me. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Splanchnizomai. That was pretty good for 9:30 in the morning. Let's say it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Splanchnizomai. I was so delighted when I was typing my notes that Google Docs actually predicted the word for me. I mean, when you do SPLAG, they're like, okay, we know where this is going. And they just put splanchnizomai. So good on Google for knowing New Testament Greek words, okay? But this means to be stirred to the guts. This is a visceral reaction that we have in our human experience. You've experienced this once when you were kind of having insomnia, so you turn on the TV one night, and that long infomercial about taking care of endangered pets comes on, and Sarah McLachlan is singing in the background and really pulling at the heartstrings. And you see all these pictures of these animals suffering, and you're like, someone needs to do something about the dogs. And then you get the wallet out of your back pocket, it just flies out of your back pocket. And next thing you know, you're putting in your credit card number into the web address because you had this reaction. Something needed to be done. Or perhaps you heard that the local elementary school just down the block from you, that 9 out of 10 kids who attend that elementary school, they can't pay for their own lunch. And so you bang your hand on the table and you said, this is not right. And you want to do something about it. When Jesus saw people, this was his reaction. He was drawn towards them, stranger or familiar. He wanted to relate to them, and he wanted to meet their need. This is what happened with my dad on that hot day. He was driving down the road. We got our own things going on, and he swerved over. We're only going to know these people for 5 or 10 minutes of our life, but he knew that he could do something. He had capacity in his soul to swerve, and so he did so. Even though they were strangers, set us back. That was the most important thing for the morning. Now, I would love to say that this is the default function of the human being right out of the box. That we are wired with splanchnizomai, running on overdrive, and wanting to meet the needs of those around us. But if you spent 30 minutes in a nursery with little kids, you know that if somebody takes something from somebody, there's a mutiny on our hands in the middle of the nursery. We are not wired to let our own needs go for the sake of another. So it's something that we have to train. It's something that we have to nourish within our life. The natural response is something that we see in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. The teacher of Ecclesiastes, who's a truth teller, and he says the hard things about life. This is what he says. And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. So this is what the teacher says. The natural inclination of a person is not to have cooperation with another, but the base response is competition with another. To have a lack, to say, whatever that person has, I want what they have. And I'm focused on getting what they have so that I can be fulfilled. We dehumanize people to say they're not a person with a name and a background and a family and wants and needs and quirks about them. We dehumanize them and say they have something that I want, and I want what they have at all costs. This word for envy in the original Hebrew language, the root word of it, means to have a zeal and a jealousy. Zeal is like this idea of a burning fire. And that's it could be a positive. Zeal is a positive thing because it can align our lives around the most important things of life, but zeal can also have a negative aspect. It makes us have a tunnel vision and focused on things that don't seem to really need that importance and supremacy in our life. And we see this from time to time, don't we? We have that friend who talks about one thing all the time. But it didn't start there. At first, they were just kind of curious about something. Insert something in the blank like cryptocurrency, right? So they mentioned it because somebody gave them the idea at work. And then they started doing a little research. And now all their Twitter feed and Facebook feed is nothing but Dogecoin and Bitcoin and all this cryptocurrency. And then they go on a few rabbit trails on YouTube and they get really educated about it. And so every time they come around us, the only thing they talk about is cryptocurrency. And why haven't you agreed with me on this yet? Something happens when we get obsessed with something. We look at people as competition or as targets to neutralize, and even to the point when we begin to chase off all of our friends because of our obsession of this one thing, we don't even stop there because we see the loss of our friends not as a deficit, but as a positive because we're now suffering for the thing that we care about the most. So we chase away relationships. We sacrifice them because we have to be right, because we have to have it our own way. So the teacher warns us, this is the default function that needs to be toggled and switched off in the human experience. He gives us a better vision in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. He says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity on anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Continuing in verse 11, also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. This verse might be familiar because it lands in a lot of marriage sermons, doesn't it? Because as 2 people commit their lives together, this is some inspiration behind it. But this was originally written in the context of 2 going on a long and dangerous journey together. Think of Frodo and Sam in The Lord of the Rings, right? If they didn't have the other, it would have been an impossible task. But when 2 work together, it's praiseworthy. There's safety, there's encouragement, and there's hope. One of the base ideas of Christianity is that Christianity is not a solo religion. It's not a lone ranger religion. It's not just me and Jesus. But as we grow in our faith in God, as we follow the path of Jesus, we'll be drawn towards people. We will swerve towards other people and have a desire to nourish relationships. So if we're trying to develop relationships around us, we want to be committed to them. Here's just a couple things that I would suggest as you and I endeavor to do so. The first one is to be intentional. I think sometimes we assume that friendships just happen, that somebody else wakes up on the same day as us and then we want to connect together. But they actually take a lot more intentionality and work. I kind of feel like friendships are, you ever been in public and you get to the door the same time as somebody else does, and there's always this awkward pause like, am I supposed to open for you? Are you going to open for me? I have no idea. And there's like this standoff, this stalemate of what are we going to do next? I kind of feel like a friendship is like that too, a relationship's like that too, where two people, like, we live on the same street and we've waved at each other for 6 months now. Is it going to go anywhere further than here, right? Or a coworker that whenever they share something, we nod our heads. We don't just doodle as we're distracted, but we actually kind of like them and they like us. And so like there's this stalemate. Who's going to do the first thing? In a relationship, it takes somebody being intentional and opening the door first. And in the Christian life, in a room full of people trying to relate, the Christian faith would tell us that it's our job to open the door first. So if you and I want to deepen relationships, it's because we're assertive in wanting to relate to another person. So this is something that I've been doing lately because I've just noticed that life is really full and it's hard to start and build and nourish relationships. So at 11 o'clock, I've got an alarm on my phone and it'll go off. And it's sad. This is sad to admit, but this is like, I don't know, maybe Relationships Anonymous. And so let me just confess something to the crowd here this morning. Like I have to build in my day some sort of alarm to set aside work tasks and to try to connect with people. So at 11 o'clock, I've got a list of names in a journal and I just work down the list and I reach out to people because I need to set myself up in a relationship mode so I can connect with other people. So if you get a text or an email or call from me at 11 o'clock, please don't see it as a duty from me. See it as love because I'm just saying I need to build this in my life. I need to be intentional. It's the same way for you. So you might ask yourself the question, how am I being intentional to deepen a relationship in my life? The second thing is to be patient. You know, sometimes I think we feel like friendship should just happen all at once. We should like just love one another all at, the very first moment that we meet each other. But it takes time. I think that we're convinced of this because in elementary school, middle school, and high school, it was so easy to make a friend. So my son Ezra's going into 4th grade, and he's learned the spiritual gift of burping on command. And his grandma taught him, and it's awesome. I just love it, right? And I have found that any kid who wants to learn how to do that or who knows how to do that becomes Ezra's friend in one moment. And we think, it used to be so easy to make friends. Maybe it was because we were always around one another. Like we were side by side in desks. We stood in hallways. We're at lunch together for like 8 hours a day. And so the time it took to build a friendship back then was so much more, it was much more compact than it is today. And so if you and I want to build a friendship, one that will last, we have to be patient. I find that a good friendship is built on 1,000 boring conversations. And it's not because they're boring. I hope it's not because I'm boring. We have to learn to relate and to like have boring conversations and go, that wasn't so bad. I'll do it again tomorrow. And the next day. And the next day. And next thing you know, you're unpacking deeper, more important things in life because you can trust that person because they haven't ran away when you talked about the stats from yesterday's baseball game. Like, they're still there. They still want to be with you. And so, number 2 is to be patient. And number 3 is to be encouraging. Communication makes every relationship rise or fall. And unfortunately, like what we see a lot in our culture is a lot of snark, a lot of sarcasm. That's great. It makes the world go round. But whenever that's in a relationship, that's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Death by 1,000 slights. And so may the major tenor of our communication with one another in a relationship be encouragement and not deficit and taking away from our relating with one another. Renovari is a spiritual formation group, and they've got this interesting pattern and formula for how you develop a faith friendship with people. They would say this: encouragement as much as possible, advice once in a great while. Dads, hear this out. We don't need to mansplain everything. We don't need to give advice on everything, okay? Just let it go. Third thing is rebuke only when necessary. And then probably the most important one, condemnation never. Romans 8:1 says there is now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. The Christian life is a space where there's no condemnation. Far be from us, for those of us who claim to be following Jesus, to lead with condemnation in any category in life. But we should lead with encouragement and advice, and on a rare occasion, rebuke, but never condemnation. At the heart of relationships is to swerve towards one another, and it causes us to do some really strange things. Take, for instance, Noah Tingle, who's a senior in high school. This is how he greeted his brother, Max, off the bus every day. You probably heard this story, but he greeted him. It was a joke on the first day in a costume just to embarrass him in front of all of his friends. But he started doing it more and more. Every day, a different costume. And when his parents began to put the video out on Facebook, it got more and more popular. And so people wanted to keep it going. So people all over the world began sending him costumes in order to greet his brother with a fresh new costume as he climbed off the bus. Can you imagine being on the bus and just wondering what he's going to be dressed up in next, right? Everybody else on the bus, Max kind of a little bit nervous about pulling up to his house. But there's something praiseworthy about this. It's strange, but there's something praiseworthy about this. His brother was getting ready to go off. Noah's getting ready to go off to college. He had precious time with his brother before he did so, and he wanted to make the most of it. And so he turned towards his brother again and again, and he wanted to relate to him. I think that might be at the heart of what it means to be in relationship. And it's an odd thing to do. It's odd to relate to one another and to swerve towards one another. But I love the way that Flannery O'Connor, who's a fiction writer and a Christian, she said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd." It is odd to befriend people not just like you, but any person who God and God's great plan for us puts us in relationship with, and to nourish it. It was odd for God to send Jesus to take on human form and to relate with us and to give us salvation. So those of us who want to follow Jesus, we need to embrace the oddity of it all and to swerve towards people in our life and to see what God would do with it as we do so. You know, as we talk about relationships, I think we're challenged in some ways to relate to other people. But I think this is a sore spot for some of us today because we have a relationship that's been unraveling in our life. We've got a fracture in a relationship, there's a fracture in our marriage relationship with our kids, in our family, a relationship at work. There was a shouting match and we've been avoiding people. And we've divided over things like religion or politics or different social issues to the point we can't even be in a room with that person. It's gotten to the point where when that person's name, not even like their last name, but just their first name is mentioned, there's an anxiety that washes over us. So when we hear this encouragement to relate, we feel a wound. There's something soft there that we need Jesus to speak to and to minister to. So I want to close the service in a unique way this morning. I just want us all to bow our heads and close our eyes. And if you've got a relationship in your life that needs to be mended, a relationship that you would like prayer for, you've got a desire to reach out to a person, but you don't know if your attempts will be received, your relationship needs prayer. And so I don't need to know the circumstances. I don't need to know all that's going on. I just want to pray for you. I just want this to be a gift to you. So if you would like to receive prayer for a relationship, I just want you to stand at this point. No one is looking around. No one's taking note about who's standing and what it might be. No one really cares. All I care about this morning is to pray for you. So I just want you to stand as a sign that you're willing to take a step of faith toward the mending of that relationship. And as you do so, let me offer a prayer over that relationship. Lord Jesus, I thank you that nothing is too difficult for you. Jesus, you said that with human beings, things seem possible. With God, all things are impossible. And so, God, for each life that's standing here, they're bringing a relationship to you. I just pray that today that you would intervene, that you'd begin the most precious work of mending relationships. God, your word tells us that we're part of the ministry of reconciliation, that you're reconciling all things. Everything is going to be mended in the new age to come. That includes our own relationships and things that have gone awry. And so, God, I pray in faith that you would mend every relationship, every need that's in this room in order to bring praise to you. And God, as we leave from this place, we thank you for the testimony of Jesus, that he had compassion. God, I pray that we would be people of compassion, that empathy would pour out from our lives, and that people's lives would be changed because of the care and concern and the grace that you give us to address every need that we encounter. May it be so as we leave from this place. I ask all these things in Jesus' name, and all of God's people said, amen. Thanks for coming this morning. Happy Father's Day. Go in peace.
Hello, Ridgepoint. Since this is the first official week with our new name, we have a handful of things we want to make sure you know about. First of all, our brand new website is live now. Visit ridgepointwichita.com to take a look around. For a while now, our old site at firstandbechurch.org will automatically redirect to the new site while we all get used to that new name. If you use our mobile app for Apple or Android devices, that should also switch over to Ridgepoint soon if it hasn't already. No need to uninstall or re-download. Your app should prompt you next time you open it to update. And if you don't have our app yet, head over to your app store and search for Ridgepoint Wichita. Second, all of our social media profiles have switched over. If you are already following First MB on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you don't need to do anything. You should see our posts on your timelines and home screens just like you used to with the new Ridgepoint name. If you're not following us yet, what are you waiting for? Search for us on any of the main platforms and follow us at Ridgepoint Wichita. The same goes for our podcast. We're working on getting all of our sermon audio podcast episodes switched over to the new name on Apple Podcasts, Google, and now Spotify. Again, just search for Ridgepoint Wichita. If you need to contact a staff person, guess what? Our email addresses also changed. You can email any of us on staff by using our first name at ridgepointwichita.com. So if you have some joke suggestions for Pastor Brent, just send them over to Brent at ridgepointwichita.com. A full staff directory is available at ridgepointwichita.com/staff, and you can also contact us directly from that page. We're still working on some building signage and a few online things, so you'll likely continue to see the First MB name for a few weeks or months while we continue working on switching things over. Thanks for being patient with us as we wrap up that process. The whole new day thing is starting to feel more and more real, isn't it? God is already at work in awesome ways, and we're so excited for this new marker in our church history. Thanks again for your involvement with us as we do all we can to help more and more people find and follow Jesus.